Her daughter entered her in the oldest relic contest, without asking. Marjorie Glenn, 74, didn't smile. She took notes. They laughed while she stood beside a butter churn. 3 weeks later, their house hit an online auction, with no reserve. They'd mocked her age, so she weaponized her paperwork, and when they tried to stop the sale, the keys were already in someone else's hands. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. They said nothing, just wheeled me in like a booth prop. The folding chair scraped against the plywood stage, its metal legs shrieking with a kind of insult only she could hear. Marjorie Glenn sat straight, her spine stiff against the breeze, clutching her purse like a lifeline as the Wichita County Fair Heritage Pavilion buzzed with laughter and kettle corn steam. A poster board leaned just beside her feet, glossy and laminated, with a headline in red block letters, "Meet Marjorie Glenn, Wichita's oldest living relic," under it. A photo of her from last year's Christmas dinner, her mouth open mid-bite, eyes glazed with fatigue. Not even cropped properly, just printed and pinned. Shelley's laughter cracked through the noise, that sugary, brittle kind. Marjorie glanced sideways to see her daughter-in-law flanked by two women from the church quilting circle, all of them squinting and giggling like teenagers. Shelley pointed toward the banner with mock pride, mouthing something like, "Isn't she precious?" Marjorie didn't speak. Not yet. Not here. She adjusted the silk scarf around her neck, the one she'd ironed herself that morning, and folded her hands over the clasp of her handbag. Her knuckles trembled slightly, but she willed them still. A teenage volunteer handed her a small button to wear. Local treasure. The pin caught her skin. She didn't flinch. "Don't take it so seriously," Derek called, waving lazily from the parking lot while chomping into a turkey leg. He leaned against the side of their faded Tahoe, sunglasses perched like arrogance across his face. "It's just a bit of fun." Fun. Marjorie's cheeks burned as a pair of toddlers ran up to the stage, pointing and asking if she was the prize grandma. One mother chuckled awkwardly and guided them away. An old friend from her Bible study walked by without stopping. Didn't even meet her. Everyone assumed she'd signed up for this voluntary, another sweet, harmless old lady happy to sit out her final years like a footnote at the bottom of someone else's story. She stayed seated. Let them laugh, let them assume. Only Landon, her grandson, seemed to notice something was off. He leaned in while pretending to help with her shawl, his voice barely a whisper. "Grandma, did you know about this? I thought." She placed a hand gently on his wrist. "It's fine, sweetheart," she said, her smile warm but hollow. "Help your mother." He paused, searching her face for something unspoken. She nodded once. He backed away. 2 rows down, Shelley held up her phone, framing Marjorie in portrait mode. "Smile, Marge," she called brightly. "Facebook's gonna love this." The camera clicked. Marjorie blinked slowly, as if erasing the flash from her eyes, though there had been no flash, just the feeling of something. A school group passed by, with a chaperone narrating bits of local history. One of the kids whispered, "She's alive," and everyone laughed. The scent of hay and cinnamon oil mingled in the air, but all Marjorie could taste was metal. She ran her tongue along her back molars and counted each second until the pageant-style humiliation wound down. A young man stepped up with a clipboard to thank her for volunteering her presence. She signed her name with her old fountain pen, making the ink loop slow and neat. Then she stood, heels clicking softly on the plywood, and walked off the stage without looking back. Shelley didn't notice she was gone. Neither did Derek. But Landon did. His eyes followed her as she disappeared behind the funnel cake tent, moving slower than usual but straighter than ever. She made it home before they did. The house, her house, was quiet. The front door left half closed, as if it belonged to everyone and no one. She boiled a single cup of tea, chamomile, drank it in the kitchen without turning on the light. Upstairs, the hallway creaked softly under her steps, old wood shifting like it remembered who built it. She went to the far dresser in the guest room, the one they said she no longer needed because it took up space, opened the bottom drawer. Beneath layers of handkerchiefs and a cedar box filled with silver dimes, she pulled out a thin, rolled parchment held together with two brittle rubber bands. The deed, yellowed at the edges, but very much alive. Her name, no co-signers, no second owners, no legal transfers. Marjorie unfolded it, laid it flat on the nightstand, and stared for a long time. Then she picked up her reading glasses, placed them on her nose, and quietly began to write something on the back of an old church bulletin. A list. It started with today's date, and next to it, just one word: Relic. They called her a relic. She called her lawyer and read her list. Not out of rage, not even revenge. It was clarity. Sharp, clean, overdue clarity that came at 3:12 a.m. long after the fair lights had gone out, when the house creaked in the kind of silence you could hear yourself aging in. Marjorie sat at the kitchen table in her flannel robe, one lamp on, casting a circle of gold over a legal pad she'd pulled from Derek's home office drawer. The pad smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and fried oil. She clicked her pen, wrote down the first memory that stung. 1. They removed the mailbox and never told me. Said it was too low for deliveries. The mail started coming to Shelley's name that week. Marjorie hadn't realized what it meant at the time, just thought maybe the carrier had made a mistake. But it wasn't a mistake, not then, not now. 2. Locked the garage for safety. My tools were still inside, so was Dad's axe. She'd asked once gently about the key. Shelley had responded with a brisk, "Oh, I think Derek moved the lockbox. You don't really need anything in there, do you?" 3. Guest room was never a guest room again. Shelley painted it mauve and called it her meditation space. They took down her wedding portrait, wrapped it in bubble wrap and put it somewhere safe. It had never resurfaced. Outside, a gust shook the trees. The wind carried the dry hiss of summer grass and the low thrum of a distant highway, a life moving somewhere else, for someone else. 4. Tucker saw me hauling the sewing machine to the barn. I never told him why. Because Shelley said it was too old to keep in the hallway, said guests might trip, as if they ever had guests. Marjorie paused, the tip of her pen pressed hard against the paper, bleeding ink into the fibers. She flipped the page, kept going. 5. They disconnected the landline without asking. 6. Said the stairs were unsafe, so I should avoid the second floor. 7. Put my piano in the garage under a tarp, claimed it was dusty. Each line was surgical, no exaggeration, no added flair, just a ledger of theft, not of items but of place, of authority, of voice. She stopped writing at dawn. The sun came up slow and indifferent. Light spilled across the countertop, catching the reflection of the deed still laid out beside her teacup. She folded it carefully, slid it into a manila folder, and tucked the list behind it. She got dressed in a beige blouse, navy slacks, and her husband's old leather belt, the one with the tooled initials, JG. The notches didn't quite fit her waist, but that was fine. She was carving out new space today. She called Doris from the porch. "You still have an open seat today." Doris's voice on the other end didn't miss a beat. "You bring that deed like I asked." I brought the deed, the survey, and a few reminders. The law office was 2 blocks off Main, tucked beside an antique store and a dentist office that had gone out of business 6 months ago. Marjorie parked in the shade, parallel and perfect. Inside, the air smelled like old pine cleaner and printer toner. Doris Neely was already standing when Marjorie stepped through the door. "Been too long," Doris said, shaking her hand firm. Her gray bob was sharper than ever, and her blazer still had those navy shoulder pads that dared anyone to underestimate her. Marjorie opened her bag, passed the folder across the desk. Doris laid everything out carefully, first the survey, then the deed. She adjusted her reading glasses and scanned both. Her eyebrows rose slowly, not in surprise, but validation. "It's all still yours," she said, tapping the edge of the paper with a red pen. "Every square foot. Legally, financially, titles clean." Marjorie leaned back, exhaled once, and nodded. "Then I'm ready to let it go." Doris smiled. Small, sharp. Turned to her laptop, cracked her knuckles, and opened a fresh document. Then let's list it. They inventoried her, so she took stock of everything they assumed was theirs. Notebooks, accent chairs, the weathered grandfather clock that once stood in her parents' foyer in Council Grove, even the red KitchenAid mixer Shelley used for Christmas cookie photos, still engraved with Marjorie's maiden initials. ML had somehow slipped out of her hands and into theirs without a word. Now Marjorie walked the house like it was a museum that forgot its curator. Each step slow, deliberate, not because of age but because of intention. Her flats whispered across the floorboards as she moved room by room, spiral-bound notebook in one hand, disposable camera in the other. The dining room table still bore faint nicks from Derek's fifth-grade science project, the one with the baking soda volcano. She bent, ran her fingers across the scarred wood, then jotted a note. Dining table, maple, 1962. Not family-owned, purchased from Myers Furniture by me and James. Receipt in kitchen drawer. The oven beeped once in the background. Someone had preheated it for Shelley's party. Marjorie didn't turn. She photographed the stovetop, the paneling, the ceiling fan. Shelley claimed always came with the house. It hadn't. She reached behind the living room couch, retrieved a folded receipt from between the cushions. Custom upholstery, purchased 200 through. Her name was still on the invoice. From the front lawn came the clatter of folding chairs and helium laughter. Shelley's voice floated in with the breeze. We just love having everyone here. It's such a blessing, this home. Marjorie stiffened, her mouth tight. She stepped into the guest bedroom, no longer hers, but an arrangement of yoga mats, a Bluetooth diffuser pulsing lavender mist, and a poster that read, "Manifest Peace." She photographed it all. Every wall, every piece of furniture Shelley swore she'd donated from her side of the family. Back in the hallway, Landon stood near the linen closet, watching her measure the width of the doorframe with a tiny rusted tape measure. You doing renovations? He asked. Marjorie didn't look up. Not quite. Landon glanced down the hall, lowered his voice. You've been different lately. More focused. Marjorie clicked the tape shut. Focus is easy when people treat your house like a rental property. He opened his mouth but didn't speak. Instead, he watched her walk into the upstairs bathroom and methodically photographed the clawfoot tub, the one Derek claimed had been hauled in by a buddy from his college days. It hadn't. It had been installed in 1985, after James passed. Marjorie had supervised every tile, every fixture, alone. From the backyard, a champagne cork popped. She leaned toward the open window just as a woman's voice cooed. It's so nice they let her stay. Marjorie blinked. Let her. She lowered the camera slowly. Behind her, Tucker's voice spoke up from the hallway, gravelly and sure. You own it, right? She turned. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his blue flannel shirt dotted with sawdust. He must have just come from a project. Not for long, she said. Her voice wasn't bitter, just bone-dry and truthful. He nodded once, like a man watching a storm form on a long, flat plain. She moved past him without another word and stepped into her old sewing room. It was bare now, save for a yoga ball and some dumbbells. The closet door creaked when she opened it, a familiar sound. In the top corner, she found a small crate she hadn't seen in months. Inside, bobbins, thread, a patchwork quilt she'd started for Landon's graduation, untouched. She brought it downstairs, tucked it under the staircase, and marked it in her inventory. Sewing materials, reclaimed, hidden, without permission. Evening came in amber streaks through the kitchen windows. Shelley's party wound down with the sound of polite laughter and paper plates being stacked. Marjorie stood at the sink, sipping iced tea, watching the shadows stretch across the yard. Her phone buzzed. A message from Doris. Auction listing is ready for draft approval. Marjorie set the glass down slowly. Outside, Shelley waved goodbye to a neighbor like she'd just hosted a fundraiser. Inside, Marjorie pressed her finger to the screen and opened the file. They brought her soup right after using her bathroom for their guests. The steam still clung to the bathroom mirror when Marjorie stepped inside. A faint trail of someone else's perfume lingered in the air, Shelley's lavender mist, overly sweet and artificial. A lipstick smear stained the rim of the porcelain sink, the kind that didn't match anything Marjorie had worn since 1986. She wiped it off with a square of toilet paper, then flushed it, quietly. Downstairs, laughter erupted. Too loud, too performative, her house echoed with a voice that was not hers. She descended the hallway and stopped at her bedroom door, just as Shelley appeared with a chipped ceramic bowl. No tray, no napkin, just a lukewarm mess of Campbell's chicken noodle and a mismatched spoon, clinking against the edge. "Thought you might want something warm," Shelley said, forcing a smile that couldn't hold its shape. "Big crowd today. Easier if you just hang out up here. You get tired around people." Marjorie didn't answer. She took the bowl and stepped backward into her room, closing the door without a word. She set the soup on her vanity. It smelled like overcooked noodles and aluminum. Through the floorboards, she could hear Shelley's voice tour guiding. "And this is the original hardwood. Derek's grandfather helped install it. Can you believe it's still in this good of shape?" No, Marjorie thought. I can't believe it either, seeing as Derek's grandfather died 3 years before the house was even built. She sat on the edge of her bed and pulled her cardigan closer. Though it wasn't cold, the party clinked and chattered below her like a show that never needed her to clap. The door creaked. Landon stood just outside it, half on the stairs, half not. 1 foot in, 1 foot out, just like he'd been for the past year. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her with a furrowed brow. She gave him a slow nod, a look that said, "Not yet." But soon, he backed away without asking more. Marjorie stood, moved to her closet, and reached behind her winter coats. From the dark came the familiar click of a latching lockbox. Inside, photographs, albums bound in cracked leather, thread spools tied with ribbon. She set them on the bed, brushing dust from the covers. Downstairs, the front door creaked open. Fresh Kansas air swept in, followed by more voices. "And that's where we're thinking about putting a sunroom," Shelley was saying. "We'd love to open up the back a little, make it more entertaining friendly." Entertaining. That word always hung in the air like a chandelier above cheap flooring. All shine, no substance. Marjorie packed slowly. She wrapped the albums in tissue paper, slid her sewing kit into a shallow box beside them. Every needle, every pair of shears, placed with care. She wasn't just sorting possessions, she was reclaiming history. Piece by piece, a knock tapped lightly on the back window. She opened it to find Tucker outside, holding a second box. "Thought I'd help before the vultures start noticing your missing feathers," he said, eyes glinting under the brim of his dusty cap. "I've got 2 ready," Marjorie replied. Together they passed the boxes through the window like bootleggers trading secrets. Tucker nodded once before disappearing around the hedges. Marjorie returned to her room, checked her watch, then opened her laptop. Her email inbox pinged, a message from Doris. Subject: auction contract. Body ready when you are. Click to sign. She clicked. The screen asked her to confirm. "Are you the full legal owner of this property?" She clicked again. "Yes." "Sign here." Her fingertip traced her name across the trackpad with steady precision. It wasn't elegant, but it was hers. She clicked submit. The screen blinked. "Your contract is now active." She deleted the message, cleared the cache, and powered the laptop down, as if the entire thing had never happened. Outside, someone knocked over a drink. Laughter roared again. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, the same ceiling they once told her was too high for someone her age to clean. They posted her age on a sign. She posted their roofline with a buy now button. The listing went live at 9 a.m. on the not a second early, not a second late. Doris had insisted on a Saturday morning launch. Highest visibility, strongest competition. And sure enough, By 9:03, the thumbnail photo was already circulating among private investor channels. A warm-lit twilight shot of the home's exterior, taken just after a rare Kansas rain, glowed on screens like a Norman Rockwell painting with an edge. 3 acres, 4 bedrooms, barn, original hardwood, newly surveyed, no liens, starting bid, $1. No reserve, the listing was airtight. A professionally written, deceptively plain description that gave just enough charm without letting on why the seller might be so eager. There were no names, no seller's note, just facts, dates, and beauty shots that looked like they belonged in a country living magazine, and a final line in bold, immediate possession upon closing. Marjorie sat at her kitchen table, with the blinds drawn and a warm scone on her plate, one she'd made from scratch, alone before anyone else woke. Outside, birds chirped obliviously. Inside, the click of her laptop felt like a trigger pulled gently but irreversibly. Doris had outdone herself. The photos were perfect, staged to look casual but deliberate. A book open on the front porch swing, sunlight streaming through the lace curtains in the dining room. The video walkthrough was paced and narrated by a neutral voiceover actress with a Midwest lick. It called the house a generational gem ready for a new chapter. The irony was delicious. Marjorie copied the link. She sent it to one local church group's email loop, the one where Shelley bragged about planning a fall harvest brunch that Marjorie was mysteriously not needed to help with. She BCC'd Tucker too, with a short subject line, "Figured you'd appreciate the craftsmanship." Then she sat back and waited. No wine, no fanfare, just chamomile tea and the humming of the refrigerator. Her only witness. A ping from Facebook broke the silence. She opened it to see Shelley's latest post. A group photo on the porch. Shelley holding a pie in one hand, Derek with a beer in the other. The caption dripped honey. "So grateful for this forever home, feeling truly blessed." Marjorie didn't smile. She simply took a screenshot and forwarded it to Doris. One word in the email body: timing. Seconds later, her phone buzzed. A text from Landon. "Landon, you sure about this? I mean, once it's up, it's up." She tapped out her reply without hesitation. Back online, the listing showed its first real activity. Views climbing. Bookmarked by 8 users. Watched by 32. She refreshed once more. First bid, $297,000. Timer 6 days, 23 hours, 58 minutes. Her heart didn't race. It settled. Because this wasn't impulse. This wasn't revenge. Not really. This was precision. The kind her mother taught her with quilting: every thread must hold. Every cut must count. She stood and opened the curtains just a crack. Outside, Shelley and Derek were hauling decorative gourds out of the Tahoe. Derek dropped one and cursed under his breath. Shelley swatted his arm and smoothed her hair for no one. They looked like a family decorating a house they believed they owned. They looked like people with no idea that somewhere a countdown had already begun. The buyer pool would only grow. Doris had made sure of that. The reach was beyond Wichita net. Out-of-state cash buyers, investors looking to flip. Even a potential B&B inquiry had flagged the property as high priority. Shelley came inside, yelling toward the stairs, "Mom, you want to help with the centerpiece, or are you still feeling tired?" Marjorie didn't answer. She walked to her room and shut the door gently, then opened her notebook and wrote 3 things down under a new heading. Confirmed, deed in hand, listing live, first bid, and she didn't need a centerpiece. She had a finish line. They thought time was on their side, but it was counting down quietly, not with alarms or explosions or messy drama. No. This countdown ticked like a pocket watch in a locked drawer, each second neatly folding into the next as the walls closed in, one polite inch at a time. Marjorie kept her days simple. At 6:15 each morning, she slipped on her slippers and watered the violets along the east windowsill. They'd bloomed too early this year, perhaps confused by the unseasonably warm spring. Outside, she refilled the bird feeder with seed from a tin. Derek claimed took up too much shelf space. The Finches didn't seem to mind. She checked the online auction 3 times a day. No more, no less. Day 2, $312,000. Day 5, $356,000. The numbers climbed with the slow, thrilling inevitability of a thunderstorm inching closer, just distant enough not to notice until you were drenched. And still inside her home, the charade continued. Shelley, swanning around the backyard in wedge sandals, spoke with absolute confidence to the visiting neighbor couple from across the pasture. "We've finally decided," Shelley said, sipping white wine at 2 p.m. "We're going to open up that back wall and add a sunroom, perfect light for houseplants. And my yoga mat, of course." From her perch at the kitchen window, Marjorie said nothing, just rinsed blueberries under cool tap water and quietly hummed Patsy Cline. Tucker dropped by mid-afternoon, pretending to deliver a replacement garden hose, though no one had requested one. He bent low beside the porch rail, face half in shadow. "You're calm for someone losing it," he muttered with a dry grin, dust on his shirt collar and a smile behind his crow's feet. Marjorie pressed a thumb into the brass spigot and watched the water trickle. "They'll feel the clock," she said. "I'm just watching it." Tucker nodded once and tipped his cap. "You've got your hands on something fierce, Marjorie." She offered no reply, just turned the hose and let the water flow until the hydrangeas' roots soaked deep. By day 6, the buzz picked up online. Doris forwarded an email from a cash buyer in Omaha asking if early possession was possible. A local commercial developer marked the listing as a priority watch. One more investor asked about rezoning potential. The property had become the kind of listing realtors sent to each other at midnight with a subject line like "You won't believe this one." And upstairs, Derek still hadn't noticed, but Landon had. He showed up late that night. No knock, no warning, just a shadow crossing the living room as the antique floor lamp flickered beside Marjorie's chair. "Tell me it's not a prank," he said, standing at the edge of the rug, like he wasn't sure if he was invited all the way in. Marjorie looked up from her needlework, glasses low on her nose. "You think I'd go through this much trouble for a joke?" He ran a hand through his hair, nervous. "It's real then? The auction? He stared at her for a beat too long, like he was trying to memorize something he wasn't ready to lose. "Does Dad know?" Marjorie didn't blink. "Not yet." Landon exhaled and sat in the chair across from her, silent for a while. When he spoke again, it was soft. "I don't blame you." Marjorie didn't smile, but her eyes softened, just enough. She nodded to the mantel clock. "It's ticking." The next morning, Shelley was humming Taylor Swift in the kitchen while arranging lemon slices in a mason jar. Derek sat on the couch eating trail mix straight from the bag. Neither of them saw Marjorie slip past with her tablet, head bowed low as if just checking her email. She was. And she wasn't. The auction had 4 hours left. Current bid, $380,000. Outside, the wind shifted, sharp and dry. The kind of breeze that always came before a downpour. They hid their cruelty in jokes. She hid the link in a shared calendar. Not out of spite, but strategy, a subtle sleight of hand, polished by years of being underestimated. It went out at 8:47 a.m. sharp. A soft ping echoed from Shelley's phone downstairs. Subject: Fair photos. Uploaded. Body added to shared calendar. Click here to view gallery. A sunflower emoji. A smiling face. Nothing unusual, except the link didn't lead to the photo album. It led to the live auction listing. By then, the bid had ticked to $380,000 and change. Timer 3 hours, 42 minutes. Marjorie closed her laptop with the same care she used to seal pie crust edges, then rinsed her teacup and set it gently on the drying rack. She heard Shelley's voice float up from the kitchen as she scrolled through her morning apps. A pause, then a sharp inhale, then crack. "What the hell is this?" Derek's voice followed seconds later, heavy-footed down the hallway, vibrating through the walls. "Marjorie," he bellowed. "Marjorie." She didn't move. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table in her robe and slippers, calmly adding milk to her second cup of tea. The spoon clinked once, twice against the ceramic as she stirred. Footsteps stormed toward the stairwell, the kind of rage you can only build when you believe something is yours. Shelley's heels slammed through the hall like gunshots. She burst into the room with her phone shaking in her hand, face pale beneath her bronzer. You posted the house? Our house? It's not your house, Marjorie replied calmly, lifting her tea to her lips. Shelley's voice cracked. You linked this to everyone. The church, the neighborhood page. Tucker even shared it to his bowling group. Marjorie exhaled through her nose. I thought people might enjoy the craftsmanship. Derek stormed in next, barefoot and red-faced, holding his phone like it might explode. You're not thinking straight. You're 78, Mom. That's elder abuse. This is illegal. I know, she said. That's why I used a lawyer. Shelley turned and scrambled to redial. I'm calling her. Doris, right? She's known you forever. She won't let this happen. Marjorie didn't respond. She just picked up the folded newspaper beside her and flipped to the crossword. The box was already half complete. She scribbled in resolve across the top row. The call connected on speaker. Doris Neely, came the crisp voice on the other end. It's Shelley Glenn. You need to tell Marjorie to take this listing down. She doesn't know what she's doing. We didn't agree to any of this. A short pause. Doris replied coolly, there's no we. Marjorie holds full ownership. She passed 2 legal capacity checks and has had title control since The contract is live. It's binding. The house is already under auction and in escrow. Shelley's jaw hung open. But she lives with us. No, Doris said. You live with her. That will end shortly. Shelley snapped the phone shut like it burned her hand. Derek muttered something unintelligible, staring at his phone like he was trying to hack time. Marjorie stood slowly, folding the newspaper under her arm. I'll need the upstairs hallway cleared by Friday, she said without blinking. Derek's mouth opened, but she cut him off with a glance so flat it dried the air between them. Shelley's eyes flicked toward the auction timer, now down to 2 hours and 58 minutes. The bid had jumped again, $389,000. A silence took the room. Not peace, not resignation, just fear. Landon's footsteps approached from outside, but no one noticed yet. Marjorie turned toward the sink and watched a pair of cardinals flit across the porch rail. A breeze lifted the kitchen curtain. Something in the house shifted. Not just sound, not just weight, but ownership. They said she was joking. She let the buyer's inspector in. Shelley stood frozen at the kitchen sink, dish towel in hand, mouth half open. You're not actually doing this, she said. It's just to scare us, right? Marjorie didn't answer right away. She adjusted her watch, wiped her hands on her slacks, and moved to the front door as if she'd been expecting someone. She had. At exactly 10:30 a.m., a silver sedan pulled into the gravel driveway, its tires crackling like fire under the weight of July heat. A tall man in a pressed Oxford shirt stepped out with a clipboard and boot covers tucked under one arm. Shelley peeked through the blinds, panic spreading like mold. No, 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 you didn't. Marjorie opened the front door. Mr. Godfrey? The man nodded. Yes, ma'am. Lead property inspector for the buyer. Is now still good? Perfect timing, she said. Come on in. Shelley practically tripped over herself trying to block the entryway. You can't just bring strangers into this house without telling us. Marjorie stepped aside, calm as morning fog. It's still my house. At least for 9 more days. Mr. Godfrey smiled politely. We'll be in and out in about 90 minutes. No disruption if you stay out of the way. Marjorie turned to Shelley with a sweetness too sharp to be mistaken for anything but deliberate. You'll want to show him the plumbing, especially the slow drain in the guest bath. Shelley blinked, color draining from her face. I told him everything I'd want to know, Marjorie said. I'm not handing off a mess. Mr. Godfrey moved room to room, snapping pictures, tapping beams, measuring doorways. Shelley followed him in a twitchy orbit, hands fluttering near her hairline. Derek lumbered downstairs in basketball shorts, already on edge. We need to talk, all of us. Family meeting. Now. Tucker, leaning against the mailbox post with a thermos in hand, didn't even look up. Meetings don't cancel contracts. Derek turned, startled. Why are you even here? Tucker tipped his thermos toward the house, making sure the right people don't back into corners they built themselves. Inside, Shelley paced the hallway like a caged animal. You can't seriously sell it out from under your own son. This house is part of the family. Marjorie raised an eyebrow. I offered it to the family. The family didn't want responsibility, just rooms. Shelley's hands curled into fists. So you punish us. Marjorie's voice dropped, steady and deep. Punishment is temporary. Ownership is permanent. That shut her up, for the moment. Landon entered through the side door quietly, watching everything unfold from the edge of the kitchen. He caught Marjorie's eye. You're not scared? He asked. She poured a glass of water and handed it to him. I've been scared. She's scared of fading out in a house full of people who only see me when I'm in the way. Now I'm moving. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, then nodded once and sipped. Mr. Godfrey walked back into the foyer, flipping through his checklist. Everything looks solid, he said. Found a minor crack in the basement molding, but no deal breakers. Thank you, Marjorie said, walking him to the door. Shelley stormed out onto the front porch and lit a cigarette she'd promised to quit. She shouted into her phone while pacing, not at anyone in particular, but loud enough for the neighborhood to hear. I don't even think she can legally do this. She's 80, she's fragile. Across the street, two neighbors out for a morning walk slowed their pace. One of them stared long at Shelley's cigarette, the smoke curling up past her furrowed brow like judgment in visible form. Mr. Godfrey got into his car and drove off. Marjorie stood on the porch behind Shelley, hands folded, letting the silence sharpen. Her phone buzzed. Doris. Offer accepted. Closing set in 9 days. Funds held in escrow. Buyer has no contingencies. She looked at Shelley's back. 9 days. 8 now. They scrambled to buy what they already claimed to own. Shelley's voice cracked on speakerphone, desperation wobbling through cheap Bluetooth. We're family, Doris. There has to be some clause. Something you can do. Please. From her seat on the front porch, Marjorie stirred her coffee slowly. She didn't speak. Didn't need to. The silence was louder than the birdsong, louder than the cicadas screaming from the maples. Doris's voice came through like clean shears, slicing tool. There's nothing to reverse. The house was listed legally. Contract executed. Escrow opened. Your name's not on the deed, Shelley. Never was. But she didn't tell us. She didn't have to. Shelley hung up without another word. She stormed back into the house, mascara smudged and blouse clinging with sweat. This isn't happening. It can't. Derek was already pacing the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. I've got a guy from Fidelity trying to pre-qualify me now. I just need a day. A day? Shelley snapped. We need cash. You can't finance an all-cash auction. We'll offer over asking then. Derek barked. We'll sweeten it. Marjorie stood in the doorway, letting the breeze curl around her ankles. You can't sweeten something you don't own. Shelley turned like she'd been slapped. You're seriously going to make us leave? After everything we've done for you? You mean soup from a can and a locked garage? Shelley's face crumpled. I gave up my apartment to live here. You gave up a lease. I gave up a husband. The room froze. Even Derek's mouth went slack. Marjorie stepped forward and placed her coffee cup in the sink with care. I warned you, she said softly. You just laughed. Later that afternoon, Shelley made 5 frantic phone calls. Her parents, her cousin in Topeka, even a former coworker who once owed her a favor. The numbers didn't work. Shelley's credit card debt was too deep. Her car was still underwater. Their checking account had overdrafted twice in the last 4 months, and the savings fund, fiction. The bank's automated reply couldn't have been colder. Pre-approval status, denied. They'd built a fantasy on a foundation they didn't own, and now the cracks were showing. By 5, Shelley was sitting on the floor of the laundry room crying into a stack of folded towels. Derek was on the phone with a third-rate mortgage lender, saying words like bridge loan and emergency equity. Every sentence sounded more pathetic than the last. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Tucker popped open a box labeled Misc Utensils and began sorting items into stacks. Spatula drawer's been a war zone for years, he muttered. Good to finally give it structure. Marjorie handed him a faded tea towel to wrap the old pie tins. Start a box for Landon, will you? The boy's got sense. Sure does, Tucker said, then paused. They still think they've got a chance, don't they? They think a lot of things, she said. Thinking's never been their issue. Doing, maybe. Tucker snorted and slid a bread knife into a sleeve of newspaper. You ever second guess it? No, Marjorie replied, and I'm done asking myself permission. That night, just after sunset, Shelley opened the mailbox expecting sympathy cards from her parents. Instead, she pulled out a thick envelope with legal weight. She turned it over, the return address Doris Neely, Eskek. Inside a notarized document, subject, Notice of Termination of Tenancy. Effective move-out date, 9 calendar days from delivery. Shelley read it once, then again, then screamed into the porch light. The neighbors looked out from 2 yards over. One of them whispered to his wife, "Ain't that the house for sale?" Derek grabbed the paper from her hand, scanning it with wild eyes. This can't be enforceable. Marjorie appeared at the screen door, backlit the hallway light. It is, she said. Signed and notarized. Just like your wedding license. Shelley sank to the porch step, the notice fluttering from her hand. Inside, the clock struck 9 p.m. 9 days, 9, and then they'd be gone from a home they never legally touched. They locked her out of rooms. She locked them out of escrow. For months, she couldn't touch her own sewing table, couldn't open the garage, couldn't even enter the guest room without stepping over yoga mats and faux Zen decor. Now they stood locked out of the one place they thought they controlled, the finish line. Escrow had closed at dawn. Doris filed the freeze immediately afterward. It was a firewall, not for the buyer's sake, but for Marjorie's. Any attempt to alter the terms would require a legal backflip they couldn't even begin to perform. Shelley and Derek found out an hour later, standing in the courthouse parking lot, after an emergency consultation with a paralegal who looked 12 and smelled like cologne. You said we still had time, Shelley hissed, clutching her phone like it might crack under the pressure. Derek jabbed at his screen. I'm filing a claim. Elder exploitation, abuse, or manipulation. She's not well enough to make these decisions. Back at home, Marjorie stirred chicken soup on the stove, homemade. Parsley from the windowsill plant. She sipped once, checked the salt, and carried the bowl to the table just as Doris's call came through. They tried it, Doris said flatly. Of course they did, Marjorie replied, folding a linen napkin over her lap. I submitted your capacity eval, dated and signed. 2 doctors, 1 cognitive review, 1 independent interview. They have no grounds. Thank you, Marjorie said, and meant it. They're locked out. It's done. They can scream all they want. The escrow is sealed. No modifications. No back doors. No reversals. Outside, cicadas screeched in the heat. Inside, the house felt quiet in a way it hadn't in years. Derek came home that evening, red-faced, reeking of sweat and frustration. He slammed the door so hard the glass pane rattled. Marjorie didn't flinch. You went too far, he snapped. You stopped drawing the line, she answered. Later that night, Landon came over, silent at first. They sat on the back porch, where the air smelled of cut grass and distant barbecue smoke. He finally spoke. Dad tried to say you were confused, that maybe someone pushed you into it. She raised an eyebrow. Do I seem pushed? No, he said. You seem like the only one who was awake the whole time. He tapped a pebble with his shoe, then looked at her with the weight of knowing. You know they never really saw you. Not after Grandpa died. I know, she said softly. They treated you like furniture, something to decorate around. Marjorie looked out across the yard. That's why I'm leaving. The next morning she walked into First State Bank, with her hair set and her handbag firm in her grip. She smiled at the young teller, asked for her balance, then said 6 words that made the girl blink twice. I'd like to close the account. The girl blinked again. All of it? All of it, Marjorie said. Please. She opened a new account down the road at Heartland Senior Credit Union, under her full name, Marjorie Louise Glenn. She'd added a password phrase too, Relic no more. By midweek she was at Sunridge Village, signing paperwork for a 2-bedroom apartment that faced a small pond. The leasing agent showed her the calendar of weekly events, book clubs, movie nights, garden walks. Marjorie took it without comment, but made a mental note to sign up for the fall wreath workshop. She didn't need space. She needed sovereignty. That night, Shelley banged on her bedroom door hard enough to rattle the hinges. You can't just leave. Marjorie sat calmly on the bed, folding her nightgown. She didn't answer. Not because she didn't hear, because some things didn't deserve a reply. Marjorie fed the final sheet into the inkjet printer, its low hum echoing through the kitchen like a closing statement. Out came the page, bold black letters, clean aligned, and a watermark seal from Doris's office at the bottom. Notice to vacate. Final reminder. Effective in 48. She taped it to the fridge, not tucked away discreetly, not slipped into a drawer, right there, eye level, between the calendar Shelley used to track brunches and the magnet that read, "Family is everything." Just below it, Marjorie pinned another piece of paper, the flyer from the fair, the one that had called her Wichita's oldest living relic. It was creased and faded now, but still legible. Shelley had laughed when she posted it on Facebook. Now it hung beside the notice like a before and after for dignity. The hallway creaked under Derek's feet. He shuffled in, phone in hand, rubbing sleep from his face. His eyes landed on the fridge, and stayed. "You're really doing this?" he asked, voice hoarse. "No," she replied. "It's already done." He looked past her, toward the front room, where boxes had started forming rows, labeled, color-coded, taped shut. Yellow tags meant items staying with the house. Blue meant going with Marjorie. Red, Derek and Shelley's things. Marjorie turned and handed him a roll of tape. "You should start with the hall closet. Those coats aren't mine." Landon arrived just after lunch, pulling his sleeves past his elbows, before lifting the first box. He didn't say much, just gave Marjorie a respectful nod and started hauling. His truck backed into the driveway. Bed open, tarp ready. Shelley appeared at the top of the stairs like a statue slowly waking up from stone. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Instead, she watched as Landon walked past her carrying a box labeled dining room glassware, not hers. In the front yard, a neighbor couple paused during their walk. They waved at Marjorie, unsure whether to smile or stay silent. Inside, Shelley followed Marjorie into the kitchen. Her voice came out brittle. "Are you really going to just throw us out?" "I didn't throw you out," Marjorie said without looking at her. "You walked in and made yourselves at home. You just forgot to ask if you could stay." Outside, movers hired by the buyer began to arrive, wearing matching navy polos. They carried clipboards and labeled stickers. Efficient, unsentimental. Shelley watched one place a red tag on the side table she'd claimed as hers during a Pinterest phase. "This is humiliating." Marjorie raised an eyebrow. "You preferred the fair poster." Tucker leaned against the porch rail, sipping sweet tea from a travel mug. He chuckled as one of the movers maneuvered around a potted plant Shelley had bought but never watered. "Reckon this is what they meant by community property," he said, just loud enough for Shelley to hear. She glared, but said nothing. Derek emerged, carrying a box marked Books Derek's office, that had mostly been used to store unpaid bills and expired coupons. His face was gray around the edges, like someone halfway through a slow collapse. Landon climbed the porch steps with the last box of photo albums. He paused, looked at his grandmother. "You sure you're okay doing the walkthrough alone?" Marjorie took the box from him. "I've walked through this house alone since the day they moved in. One more time won't hurt." She set the photo albums beside her sewing kit and closed the lid gently. That evening, as the sun sank low and the cicadas began their electric hum, Marjorie walked the house one last time with her list in hand. Walls she'd painted, floors she'd swept, rooms that had once been hers, and would soon belong to someone else entirely. At the front door, she reached into her purse and felt the weight of the keys, still warm. They served her leftovers. She served the buyer champagne. The kitchen still smelled faintly of bleach and panic. Shelley had scrubbed the counters that morning too little too late, as if polish could erase entitlement. Upstairs, muffled footsteps paced behind a closed door. Neither Shelley nor Derek had come down. They weren't invited. Downstairs, the table was set with quiet elegance. White linens, polished silver, mismatched china that Marjorie had loved more for its imperfections. In the center sat a tray of deviled eggs, a roast chicken still steaming, buttered corn sliced off the cob, and her famous lemon cake, moist, zesty, unapologetically hers. The guest of honor arrived at 6 hours sharp. "You must be Ms. Glenn," the buyer said, extending a hand. "I'm Ryan Cahill, and this place, it's something else." Marjorie took his hand, firm. "Welcome home." Tucker stood by the sliding door, tie askew but shirt freshly ironed, and held up a bottle of sparkling apple cider. "No champagne in this house since 1989, but this'll do." Doris, ever composed in her navy suit and low heels, offered a faint smile. "It's not about the drink, it's about the toast." They gathered around the table as Landon pulled out a chair for Marjorie. He sat beside her, quiet, watchful. His hair was still a little damp, like he'd showered just for this. "Derek and Shelley won't be joining us, I assume?" Doris asked, sipping water. Marjorie cut into the roast with graceful precision. "They've already had their share." Laughter, gentle and knowing, floated across the table. After dinner, Marjorie offered Ryan a brief tour. It wasn't long, just the core, just what mattered. She walked him through the entryway and into the den, past the fireplace where the mantel once held, framed smiles now boxed in the trunk of Landon's truck. "This is where I became a ghost," she said, pausing in the archway. Ryan blinked. "I'm sorry." "People can live in a place and still not be seen," she said simply. "It happens slowly. One lamp moved, one lock changed, one name taken off a bill. Before you know it, you're haunting your own home." He nodded, thoughtful. "That won't happen here. I promise." She led him back to the table, where Tucker poured another round of cider. Landon leaned toward her, voice low. "You didn't owe me anything, you know." Marjorie looked at him for a long moment. "That's why you get." His eyes glistened, just enough for her to notice but not mention. As the sky darkened outside, they sat together beneath the soft glow of the old dining room chandelier, a hand-me-down from her sister's first apartment. Conversation drifted between garden plans and childhood memories, past hurts and future chapters. No one rushed, no one interrupted. The house, for once, felt whole. Upstairs, a door slammed. No one flinched. Tucker raised his glass, to reclaiming what never should have been borrowed. They clinked their glasses gently, like church bells over a prairie. Marjorie's phone buzzed on the sideboard. She stood slowly, crossed the room and picked it up. New email, subject: sale confirmation, body funds cleared, escrow closed, transfer complete. She didn't smile, but she exhaled, and the weight of decades seemed to fall off her shoulders with that breath. She walked back to the table, poured herself a fresh glass, and sat down without fanfare. "Everything all right?" Ryan asked. "It is now," she said. She redirected the flow, not out of cruelty, but intention. Not to take from them, but to return something to herself. Choice, voice, control. 2 days after the final sale funds hit her account, Marjorie walked into First Heartland Bank in a crisp navy blouse and slacks she hadn't worn since James's memorial service. The teller, young, polite, and visibly nervous, guided her into a private office where a financial advisor waited. She passed over a sealed envelope. Inside, instructions for a new education trust. Beneficiary, Landon Glenn. Purpose: tuition, housing, and relocation assistance for graduate-level study. Contingency: cannot be redirected, sold, or borrowed against, not even by parents. This will secure him through age 30, the advisor said, scanning the paperwork. "With room to spare." "That's the point," Marjorie replied. His future should have room. By noon, it was finalized. At 3 p.m., she visited the county registrar's office, stepping through the same doors she and James had once entered to file their marriage license. There, she met a representative from the Wichita School Endowment Program. A one-time donation was made in James Glenn's name, a full scholarship fund, earmarked for first-generation college students from rural counties, minimum 10 students. The woman told her, stunned. You changed their lives. Marjorie smiled softly. Tell them to send thank you letters to the address on file. She paused, then added, but only if they want to. The next morning, her inbox pinged with an email from Doris's assistant. Subject: cease and desist from Shelley Glenn. Attached PDF. Marjorie didn't even open it. Doris texted 5 minutes later. Already handled. Denied. There's no legal standing, she replied with a thumbs-up emoji. 2 hours later, her phone rang. Derek. Again. She stared at the screen. His contact photo was still the same. A blurry shot from 5 years ago, back when he wore ties and smiled with confidence that hadn't yet soured. The phone rang 6 times. She didn't answer. The voicemail that followed was wet and fractured, something between pleading and regret. Mom, please. I'm sorry. We were stupid. I was stupid. I didn't know what you were really feeling. Please just, can we talk? She listened once, deleted it. And that was the last time she heard his voice. That afternoon, she met Doris at her office. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper. Doris shut the door gently behind her and pulled out a thin manila folder. Everything's ready. Marjorie took a deep breath. She opened the will, read through each line. Her handwriting had replaced the old version. Cleaner, sharper. Derek Glenn, intentionally excluded. Shelley Glenn, intentionally excluded. All material assets to be distributed to non-profit educational trusts and one primary beneficiary, Landon R. Glenn. The final page included her signature, notarized and dated. She added one last thing, a postscript, handwritten at the bottom. Legacy isn't about what's passed down, it's about who would have earned it, even if nothing was passed. She passed a second envelope to Doris. Inside were 2 sealed letters, one addressed to Shelley, the other to Derek. Hold them, deliver when you think it matters, Marjorie said. Or don't, that'll be your call. Doris nodded solemnly and slid the envelope into a drawer. As Marjorie stood to leave, she pulled out her phone. It still buzzed daily with numbers she no longer recognized, unknown calls, blocked IDs, the occasional vague text that said, seriously. She opened the settings. Change number, yes. Are you sure? This action is permanent. She pressed confirm. A new number blinked onto the screen, fresh, untouched, like a blank page waiting for a better story. Outside, the sky was beginning to shift, early hints of fall in the trees. She stepped into the golden light and walked back to her car, parked neatly beside the courthouse steps. The old title was gone, the new one etched not in paper, but in action. Last year she was a relic. This year she was a guest judge. Same county fairgrounds, same humidity clinging to the wind, same banner flapping above the gravel parking lot, sun bleached at the corners. But this time, no one wheeled Marjorie in. She walked. Her pace was unhurried, her blouse crisp and lemon-colored. A wide-brimmed hat shielded her eyes. Her name tag read, Judge, Local History and Heritage Displays, Marjorie L. Glenn. There was no age printed beside it, no patronizing bio, just her name, standing alone. She moved through the rows of folding tables with quiet confidence, clipboard in hand, stopping every so often to study a Civil War photograph or ask about a preserved butter churn. The entries were humble. Photo albums, journals, heirlooms sealed in glass, and they reminded her of the things worth keeping. Not the material kind, but the kind with story. Ms. Glenn? A teenage girl asked shyly, holding out a pamphlet with her school's entry. We read about you in the archives. Your family's first farmhouse design is in the county files. Marjorie took the pamphlet, smiled. They got the porch dimensions wrong, but the heart's there. The girl grinned like she'd just met royalty. Across the green, Shelley passed by. She wasn't dressed for the fair, heels on grass, arms crossed. She stopped short when she saw the name tag, saw the crowd shifting around, Marjorie like petals folding toward sun. Shelley blinked once and kept walking. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Doris appeared beside the corn dog stand, wearing tortoiseshell sunglasses and handing out flyers for the Historical Society's new oral traditions project. "You're drawing more attention than the rodeo goats," she quipped. "I prefer goats," Marjorie said. Near the barn entrance, a laminated flyer tacked to the side of the exhibit booth caught her eye. She stepped closer, heart slowing. Gone was the oldest living relic sign from last year. In its place, a framed portrait, her own, taken at the dinner table just after the sale closed. No captions, just a gold-embossed line at the bottom. Marjorie Glenn, lifelong resident, storyteller and advocate for ownership. Marjorie stared at it for a long time, letting the noise of the fair dissolve around her. The scent of fried dough, the buzz of laughter and tractors, the tinny speaker announcing winners, all of it blurred under the pressure of memory and reclamation. Someone tapped her shoulder gently. It was Landon. He held his phone out, smiling. "Thought you should see this." On the screen was a photo posted by the new homeowners, Ryan and his wife standing on the front porch. Marjorie once swept every morning for 30 years, a casserole dish in her hands, a toddler clinging to his leg. The caption read, "First dinner in our dream home. Thanks, Miss Glenn. Your spirit's still here." Marjorie took a moment to study the photo, how the porch glowed in the evening sun, how happy they looked without even trying. She handed the phone back. "It's good they know it's not just a house." "They do," Landon said. Then from his pocket he pulled a small familiar object, a brass key on a blue ribbon. "What's this?" she asked, her hand out. "To your new place," he said. "I picked it up this morning. Thought you might want to unlock the door yourself." Marjorie accepted the key, curling her fingers around it like it was the final piece in a puzzle. She hadn't realized she'd been building her entire life. Behind them, a small group of fairgoers gathered near her portrait, pointing, nodding, smiling. But Marjorie didn't look back. She and Landon walked toward the exit as the sun dipped low, the fair alive with lights and music and the smell of kettle corn. Her clipboard swung gently at her side, forgotten now. In her hand the key was warm. They auctioned off her dignity. So she auctioned their comfort, and it sold fast. Now she sips tea in silence that belongs only to her. No shouting in the hallway, no doors slammed in the middle of the night, just the hush of a place earned, not inherited. Sunridge Senior Village sat on a hill just high enough to catch the golden fringe of Kansas sunsets. The two-bedroom unit had large windows, soft carpet and no shared spaces someone else tried to control. The staff waved when they passed her door. The other residents respected her quiet. Best of all, the keys jingled in her purse like a gentle reminder, "This place is yours." Every Tuesday at 2 hour, Landon visited with a deck of cards and a bag of homemade snickerdoodles. "You could let me win once," he said. That afternoon, tallying another losing hand. "I'm 78, not dead," Marjorie replied, shuffling with an efficiency that made him laugh. Their weekly games started as a courtesy, but by now they felt like ritual, one that restored something neither of them had fully named. He told her about real estate courses, asked questions about zoning laws and appraisal methods. She answered thoughtfully, always with that same calm precision she'd once reserved for canning recipes and needlepoint charts. One morning, a padded envelope arrived in her mailbox. Inside was a handwritten letter, creased carefully and sealed with school district stationery. "Mrs. Glenn, my name is Anna Ramirez. I'm the first recipient of the James Glenn Rural Scholar Fund. I cried when I opened the email. You didn't just give me money. You gave me a key out of a place where people like me don't always get a second look. Your husband must have been something special, because you are too. With all my heart, thank you." Anna Marjorie read it once, then again, then placed it between the pages of a small notebook tucked into her nightstand. Outside, the air smelled like marigolds and fresh mulch. Her patio overlooked a patch of native prairie grasses and a lone oak tree. its leaves just starting to rust at the edges. She sat with her tea and watched the sun melt like honey over the horizon. A knock came at the side gate. Tucker stood there, holding a terracotta pot with soil still fresh around the base. Figured you might miss this old girl, he said, patting the lip of the planter. Split her off the mint bed by the barn. She's stubborn like someone else I know. Marjorie accepted the plant with a soft smile. Thanks, Tucker. He looked around the patio, eyes taking in the calm, the view, the stillness. Well, he said, tipping his cap, looks like you finally got the last word. I didn't need the last word, she replied. I needed the final say. That evening, the apartment glowed with late sun, casting long shadows against her walls. Marjorie pulled out a leather-bound journal. New, its spine barely creased. She opened to the first page. They entered me in a contest. I entered them in an auction. She let the pen rest for a moment. She thought of Derek's final voicemail. Deleted, forgotten. She thought of Shelley's cease and desist, now buried under legal filings she never had the leverage to understand. She thought of the house, not a home anymore, but a beacon for a family who would earn it, live in it, and never once call its matriarch a relic. She kept writing. 1 page, then 2. Outside, the wind rustled through the oak tree. Distant laughter from the rec room filtered through the windows like a song only half remembered. But here in her chair, on her time, she wrote the story they tried to erase. She set the pen down and looked out across the prairie. The world didn't feel smaller. It felt newly drawn.